This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight is stuck in a Moscow metropolitan traffic jam. He's been on the show before. Stanislav Kraprivnik. He's a Russian-born American citizen, served in the United States Army, since returned to live in Russia. We've talked about the status of the war. He's an expert. And tonight, we're going to first talk about a blog post he posted recently about the economic booms, plural, occurring in Russia these days. Welcome back to the show, Stas.
Thank you. One correction: I have dual citizenship, so I'm here legally and permanently.
Okay, glad to clarify that. So you're in your car. You're not moving, correct?
No, unfortunately, I'm not moving. Rolling forward a little bit at a time, but not moving, no.
Yeah. So I want you to talk about this post, this article you made, and you talked about three booms, economic booms occurring in Russia simultaneously. Start with this anywhere you want.
Well, the first economic boom that hit Russia was actually in 1998. It occurred right after the currency collapse. Between 1991 and 1998, Gaidar, who was Minister of Industry, Economics, and several other of his occults, they were in a process of this neoliberal sell all the industry off. We don't need it. We can just sell resources. We'll be a resource powerhouse, which there's no such thing as a resource powerhouse. You either manufacture or you're second rate, or third rate if you're a former French colony in Africa, and still paying the French to stay off your back. So the Soviet industry collapsed totally. Soviet era industry, because it was sold off. It was stripped. It just had buildings left over. People were even forming organized defense squads to sit at the factories and defend the factories from being stripped. So that's part one. So 1998 rolls around, second half of 1998, and the the ruble collapses. Yeltsin and his band had been doing this Ponzi scheme on the ruble, way overvalued to what its real strength was. And remember, Russia had almost no gold reserves at that point. Everything had been sold off, everything had been stolen, and the ruble collapsed. What happened next was all these imported goods, primarily in this case in the food industry, clothing, things like that, particularly food. All these imported goods were imported on the dollar, euro, yen. Actually, I guess there was no euro at that moment, so it was Deutschmark, the lira, and they all became way too expensive. Which there was now a demand for these types of goods and other basic goods, and they couldn't be brought in. So that inadvertently cleared the field for a lot of Russian companies to get started and enter the market. So doing so, that was the first economic boom. Not something anybody was expecting. After that, the foreign companies either came back in when the ruble restabilized and got restructured, or what a lot of them did was when they entered back in, they bought up the Russian companies that had now grown. So a lot of these some of the companies had gotten so big that they couldn't be bought out and they couldn't be driven out of business, and they remained. So a lot of the Russian food industry had their boom in '98 and came onto the world first the Russian and then the regional market, and further out from that. After that, Russian industry has been growing. It's been growing slowly. It's gotten its ups and downs, and so on, steadily and not so steadily, until localization started, import substitution, and that kind of moved on from what after Putin announced that in 2014, it kind of went on half-stand, a little here, a little there, and a lot of nothing big. Up until 2022. So 2022, actually even before that, with COVID, that showed that the Russian biotech industry is actually alive and well and was growing, because the Sputnik vaccine came out fast, true, it used old technology, old proven safe technology. It doesn't cause meter-long blood clots like the mRNA vaccines seem to do, and raise death by stroke sixfold, like the mRNA vaccine seemed to do. But it came out fast, and it was backed up by manufacturing. And then, like I said, the special military operation rolls around. And as we all know, the West, particularly the Americans and the English, had this great idea that as soon as they put sanctions, as soon as they put pressure, Russia would collapse, fold like a cheap suit. 2 weeks. Okay, fine. 2 months. Okay, 6 months at the outset. Okay, now we're on a year. Now we're a year and a half. And things aren't going the way they're supposed to be going. So with all these sanctions, there's a lot of very criminal activity done by the West. Seizing of Russian from any Russian company. I know a lot of people. They're not linked to the government. They're on a sanction list. They sent materials to Europe. They never got paid. Sorry, we'll pay you after the war, maybe. Good luck. Or they ordered things and their money was just stolen. So the West took it as an opportunity to steal. And this isn't even major companies, it's average middle line companies doing this. So that not only has that just destroyed, wiped out any reputation the Western governments, countries, and economies and their participating industries have in Russia. I mean, it's a ruin for at least 2 generations. But the Russian answer has all of this been additionally. Well, first of all, it started the next boom because Russian industry, again, has gotten rid of a lot of its competitors. In this case, the competitors left themselves. And 2, when they try to cripple the Russian economy by stopping the manufacturing plants that were Western-owned, Russia just started confiscating them. And they are paying out at 3 to 5% value. So all these plants are now being sold off to Russian companies, and the Russian companies have just gotten a big boost. They've gotten rid of their competitors internally. They got their infrastructure, and they can start manufacturing. And what's happening now is it's gearing up. It's filling in the holes. From the agriculture point of view, Russia produces about 95% of the food it needs as far as variety. I mean, it can feed itself indefinitely, but as far as there's 5-6% of the food that's imported because it can't be grown in Russia. Exotic fruits, certain types of fish, and so on. Having said that, the Russian industry right now is filling in the holes inside of Russia. But without the Western competition and with that infrastructure, it's going to start filling in the holes regionally and then start filling in the hole coming out as global competitors in the long run, in the medium run even.
Well, talk to me about the effect that it's had on tourism.
Tourism. Oh, yeah. No. First of all, internal tourism is expanding very well. And thanks in part to this. COVID actually helped quite a bit on that. Up to 1990, up to 2014, there really was no emphasis in the Russian government on tourism. Visas were difficult to get, relatively difficult to get, and the reason for that is the security services want to know everything about everybody who's coming in. They were on the and the security services are paid to be paranoid, and they were acting very, very paranoid. On top of that, there was really no work to spruce up tourist attractions and so on. And Russians, not that many people came to Russia as tourists, and most Russians didn't stay in Russia as tourists. There were a few spots that brought in tourism, but the vast majority of the country didn't. And a lot of and that's considering Russia is number 4 on the UN UNESCO list as far as the number of sites worldwide. And then after 2014, there was a large drive for development of an internal market for tourism. And that puttered along. There was movement there, and there was an increase in tourism. The football championship did a lot to actually move tourism forward. And it was done in 11 different cities, if I remember correctly. And it was done like that for a reason. For one, to show it's not just Russia and just Moscow and St. Petersburg that are developing, it's all of Russia. And it's hard to hide it when you got tourists, football fanatics all over Russia in 11 different cities. Hard to hide any issues, so people see it. And the development they also saw. And then COVID, of course, hit everything. So we couldn't fly outside the country, and that forced development inside of Russia. Because in Russia, the COVID restrictions, there was a lot of lip service paid to it, but that wasn't that much actual restrictions. We just got over the COVID. And COVID ended 23rd of February, 2022. It's an interesting little fact. This SWO has fully cured COVID in this part of the world. So nobody gave a damn about it after that. But with the cancellation of Russian visas and Shanghai visas and so on, Schengen visas, Russians started traveling a lot more inside the country, plus a patriotic feeling. And in turn, there's been a lot of development. In fact, I went with my family to Nizhny Novgorod, which is a city that's about 800 years old. And then there are a bunch of other cities, including even small cities like Murom, which is 1,200 years old, so on. And it's day and night. I mean, there's some of these cities I visited for work, working with local suppliers. Some cities I haven't been in 10 years, and you see a huge difference as far as the infrastructure for tourism. Huge difference. So there's a lot of that. Plus, we've got a lot of other tourists, Chinese. The Chinese are flooded in. There's actually quite a few Americans and Europeans still coming. The U.S. government. I talk to people still know from the U.S. and the U.S. They're always. It's you can't get a visa to come in Russia. Sure you can. It costs about $80 and takes 10 days. You can get a 3-year multi-entry visa. You can stay 180 days, leave for a day, and come back for 180 days. No issues. Oh, it's dangerous. No, it isn't. Nobody beats up Americans or Brits or whatever. Some of them probably deserve it because there's occasional one that mouth is off. But the vast majority of people, they're normal. They act normally. Nobody touches them. And as far as crime, Russia is much less criminally inclined than anything in the West these days. There's no safe Western countries. Every one of them, crime is just skyrocketing, murder skyrocketing. And there's issues for why that's happening, but we're not going to discuss that right now. So tourism inside of Russia is booming. And a lot of foreigners are coming in, particularly East Asians. And they spend more than Europeans and Westerners. That's also a big plus.
Well, I can tell you, living in the Crimea, the influx of Russians over the last 2 or 3 years because of COVID and then the war has really been significant. Prior to the sanctions, there were some 100 cruise ships that were in the Black Sea coming to Yalta, Sevastopol, Sochi, and now they're gone. So that's hurt. But as you mentioned, there's just been a tremendous influx of Russians who have never been here. And as you said, have never been to some of these other incredibly beautiful and historic cities. So I've witnessed that myself. However, I have to tell you, uh, this summer has been slow because of the missile attacks and drone attacks on the bridge in Crimea. I think it scared a lot of people off because it is definitely down. Now, I want to go back to agriculture and food production. You know, you and I both know that there were reports coming out of the West in the United States that the shelves in the grocery stores are empty. There's no food. Uh, Tell me a little bit about your experience in Moscow. Now, I've been in Moscow several times, but the first time was in 2016. I came here thinking Moscow was still communist, still Soviet, poor, and I was blown away at the incredible architecture, the incredible high-rise buildings in that Moscow city center. I was blown away by the shopping malls and all the food and stores, all European American brands. Um, is that still the case in Moscow? What is it like in Moscow in terms of having lots of food, lots of products? I mean, are you feeling any shortages? Are you missing anything?
I'm not going to talk about Moscow because Moscow's the capital, and you expect everything to be in the capital. I'm going to talk about Nizhny Novgorod, which is the sixth largest city in Russia, or Vladimir, which is probably about the 10th largest city. I also stayed there, and the shelves are full, and the globuses are full, and the OKs and the lentas are full. Everything is packed. There is no shortages. There never was shortage. First of all, Russia can't go hungry. We feed half the world. I mean, just on that basic level. And I had gotten into arguments. I don't bother try to argue because people that keep pushing it are usually idiots. Um, People I used to work with, you think they're intelligent, but they read and they just repeat whatever the hell the MSM tells them. And then the mass media, it's their God's word as far as I'm concerned. And you're all gonna starve now. Like, we feed half the world with wheat, with rice, with chicken, and so on, poultry. How the hell are we gonna starve? I mean, just do the basic math. Sure, we might not have everything that we're used to, but we're not gonna starve. We just can't starve. We have more than enough food to feed 3 or 4 Russians. And the grocery stores are full.
Yeah.
And it's much cheaper than anything you're going to find in Europe. And it's better quality. Anything that you're going to find in the U.S. And GMOs are banned. So that's a big one.
Well, we're talking about food. And, as you said, people just don't believe it when we tell them. We occasionally will go into a grocery store for some things. We buy almost everything from these outdoor markets, and they're everywhere. There's a huge one here in Yalta. There's one in our neighborhood. The stuff is farm fresh. You don't have to worry about it. And people just can't get their arms around this, as you said, that Russia is doing that well in terms of food production. You mentioned agriculture. Russia is basically now number one producer of grain, maybe even larger than the United States now. All right.
I'll even add. I troll people. I'll go into one of these big grocery stores and small grocery stores. Actually, the big ones, they're big. So you go to a small grocery store and you start taking photos of the dairy aisle or the processed meat aisle, and then that blows people's mind right there, because in the U.S., you know how much of a choice you have. Not much. You have 1-2 companies in any local market producing the mill goods, and it's not that big of a choice of the mill goods to begin with. And here you've got choice 3-4 times larger. Tons of cheeses, tons of this, tons of that. And it's not just U.S., which shocks a lot of Russians because they're used to, especially before the war, there would be a lot of different wines from all over Italy and cheese and all that. And then they go to Italy and they find out that there's no choice. Because in Italy, when you get there, or in France, you're getting whatever that province is producing. They don't import from any other province. They're in competition with every other province. In Russia, you're getting it from all over Italy, every province, is pushing, or every province in France. You go to those countries, and it's just whatever the local manufacturing is. And the local union or local guild is blocking any imports from the next neighboring province. You got to drive over there if you want their choice. So it's a huge choice. I mean, the amount of products you can choose from is just gigantic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Friends would come over, we take them straight to the grocery store. There you go. There's your first shock.
And I'll tell you what, when people come to Crimea and they sample Crimean wines and local cheese products, these small entrepreneurs are producing incredible cheeses that rival anything you could find in Italy or France. I mean, I won't drink anything else now. I won't drink anything else now except Crimean wines. But as you said, you can get Georgian wines here, which are fantastic. You can get wines from other parts of Russia. And this belief that I think a lot of Russians had, we can't live without Italian, French wines, Spain, cognac from somewhere else. I have to tell you, I like cognac. And Crimea produces some that I think is as good or better than Ararat, and as good or better than I've had in France. I'm telling you, it's smooth. It has a nice aroma, and it does the same job. All right.
Oh, you're making enemies left and right now. You're saying those words, especially the French. They'll never forgive you. They'll let you in France.
A lot of people say you shouldn't be having such a good time over there when there's a war going on. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about technology. I've heard it said, and I have a Russian friend. He's an expert in all things nuclear, nuclear weapons, nuclear treaties. He's written 7 books. He's in Moscow, and it might be good to meet him someday. He said, and he confirmed what I read in a foreign paper, that Russia was 10 to 15 years ahead of the United States in military technology, in radar, hypersonic missiles, all of that. You being a military guy, would you agree or would you disagree with that?
Not in everything, but in most things, yes. And the Ukrainian polygon has shown that NATO's equipment is mostly outdated junk. Even the high-tech NATO equipment is mostly outdated junk. Part of it is, the U.S. has decided and started announcing, we're going to build hypersonic weapons. We're going to challenge Russia. We'll be there in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years now. And, realistically, 10, 15 years. And there's different reasons for that. One is the West, and particularly American modus operandi of just throwing money at any issue. You don't need to be smart. You just need to have lots of money. You can throw money at it. And that proved to be a failure. That's why until this war started, the U.S. really didn't believe Russia had hypersonic missiles. It didn't. There's all this cartoons, it's this, it's that. It's not really, it's not real tests. Blah, 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 blah. Because the U.S. couldn't develop hypersonic missiles. Nothing's decent. They couldn't develop the nanotechnologies for the coatings, the graphite coatings, that will keep the missile from melting at such high speeds because of the friction rates, and keep it maneuverable and so on. Russia did it. And nobody believed it. Well, now they have no choice to believe it because they're getting hit by them. The Western equipment and Western instructors are getting whacked by them. They're coming in. So yeah, now they believe it. Well, the U.S. said, yeah, we'll have it in 3 years. The U.S. can't. And one of the major reasons the U.S. can't is the way the technology is produced and procured in the U.S. It's the defense manufacturers in Russia are either fully or partially state-owned. I'm not big on state-owned enterprises, but in certain sectors you need it. This is one of those sectors because their first and main goal is to provide weapons for the state to defend itself. In the U.S., no. Their main goal is to provide expensive equipment that will provide continuous value streams. Value streams such as parts, instructors, consultants, and so on. So then you get things like the M16 that's got tiny little parts to it. And that's an easy example. You get things like the Bradley, which is a vehicle built by a committee, general's committee. All this equipment that comes in that's constantly falling apart. It constantly has to be maintained. Parts constantly replaced. Huge value streams for Boeing, huge value streams for Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and so on. Crap for the military, especially if you have to try to do repairs out in the field. So there you have it. That's the difference in that technology. The U.S. can't move forward that fast because the issue isn't to build good weapons. It's to make a lot of money. Ростислав, ты от меня получишь.
That's okay.
Бери лицо с экрана.
That's okay. That's okay. But people can see that you're normal, just like everybody else in America. They're having the same issues.
I don't know if I'm normal, but I'm having the same issues.
All right, so
I know what I'm insane. I don't try to hide that. I try to get enjoyment out of my insanity.
Yeah, well, that's
I don't
good.
suffer from it. I get enjoyment.
So let's talk about technology a little bit more. Russia, since, was it 1958 or 59 with Sputnik, beep, 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 put the first satellite in space. They put the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, the first woman in space, and many other achievements. And then for a long time, not much, but it became clear that they were way ahead of the Americans because the Americans couldn't get to the International Space Station without Russian rockets. And now Russia has its own new moon mission where they plan on landing on the South Pole. It's never been done before, and they believe that there's water there. They're freaking out in America. America, it's even questionable whether they went to the moon in 1968. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, yes, Russia did everything first except for land on the moon. First space station, second space station. Third station was Skylab from the U.S. And then the fourth space station, I think it was also Russian. And then the fifth space station is this International Space Station, which Russia is pulling out of. It's already given notice. Rostislav, убери. There's got to be a lot of editing on your part.
I might not edit some of those minor things.
As far as the moon mission, the lander was left behind, the lower portion of the lander, right? So they got the coordinates of where it's supposed to be to show it. Prove it once and for all. You got the telescopes, they can find it. Show that it's on the moon. And it's covered in reflective foil, for God's sake. So that shouldn't be an issue to show it. So yeah, right there, one way or the other, you can disprove prove that there was a landing on the moon by human beings. from NASA.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I there are sectors where Russia is well advanced, far more advanced than the U.S. And Europe. There are sectors where Russia is lagging behind. For whatever reason, we can build excellent tanks, we can build excellent planes, we can build good combines, tractors, but we don't seem to have ability to build decent cars. Not since Tsarist times. Soviet legacy is the consumer light automobile has been usually copied from somebody else. So I don't know why that is, but that is a tendency. Yeah, we certain areas we lag behind. Other areas we're pretty far advanced.
Yeah, and I'll say,
my personal view at this.
Go ahead.
Good. My personal view at this point is any country that is hostile to Russia, their patent rights should be ignored. Because guarantee you, U.S. is going to ignore any Russian patent rights.
Of course.
Same thing with the Brits and others. So we need to stop playing by foreign rules and just go ahead. You know, the U.S. There's an interesting little thing about U.S. history. U.S. Industry started after the U.S. lost the War of 1812, which is actually 1811. 1812 was when it ended. Before that, the movement was to make this agrarian Christian utopia, and then after the War of 1812, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you froze up. That's fine. Then after the War of 1812, the U.S. The government figured out in the U.S. that it needed to industrialize. They couldn't fight the British. And the way they did that to do quick industrialization is they got people with photographic memory. They sent them to the UK as for procurement of different British goods, and they asked to be shown these marvelous super British factories with their steam engine machines, and they just memorized it, charted it down, and took the designs back home. So basically, the U.S. industry started up as massive industrial theft from the British. So, yeah, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah. And, you know, I have to mention, and always have to mention, the Russian public transportation system everywhere I've been, and that's not all over Russia, is incredible. The Moscow Metro is unrivaled anywhere in the world. I've done videos on this. Public transportation. Here in Yalta, for example, a small city, very small city, has excellent bus transportation, public buses, electric trams, and an incredible fleet of taxi cabs, different companies that you can go from one part or the other of Yalta or even to the outskirts for a few bucks, $5 to $6 at most. It's incredible. I didn't want a car when I came here. I don't have one. I don't need one. I save a lot of money not having a car. So anyway, we've been talking about economic, technological, agricultural booms in Russia. Russia is doing exceptionally well, and especially well because of the sanctions. They've been forced to. You made that clear. I want to shift gears now with a little time we have left. There was a peace conference in Saudi Arabia. I want your thoughts on that. I'm not going to editorialize or opine on that, but I want your thoughts on that peace conference in Saudi Arabia.
Well, let's begin with the logic of having a peace conference between two warring sides where only one of them is invited, or is actually running the show, and the other one is not. Particularly the one that's winning the war is not. So, right off the bat, I mean, that's ludicrous to begin with. Second of all, as everybody told Zelensky basically at this peace conference the Saudis were hosting, everybody's trying to get a little bit of their political, diplomatic fame off of this war. As they basically told him, is you got to drop all of your preconceived notions that you're ever getting anything back. It's gone. Face it. Ukraine won't, and Ukraine, nobody was. You know, the peace conference. The problem with it, of course, to begin with, is the real owners of this conflict, from either side, perhaps. Ukraine is meat to be used, a human resource to be used, squeezed out, and thrown away. It's run by a dictator that's kept in power solely by the U.S. and the U.K. and by their vassals, other vassals in Europe. So even if I don't know what could have come out of this, because in the end, he's not. Zelensky signed a law for himself, banning himself from ever negotiating with the Russian government. So short of somebody finally putting a bullet in his head, there ain't nothing ending this until there is no Ukraine. I mean, that's how it is. These are the idiots that chose their own path from the very beginning to the very end, or had their path chosen for them by their owners. So that's all I can say on that peace conference.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because you've been analyzing and commenting on the war and Zelensky. I think you and I both know, and you mentioned that Russia has already won this thing, except for killing the last Ukrainian and the last mercenary that's in there. I can't believe how Zelensky has survived, how someone hasn't offed him. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I would think even people in the military know what's going on, that they wouldn't eliminate him, and also maybe a lot of these U.S. and foreign advisors. Well, I just can't believe it.
Well, first of all, from day one, his bodyguards have been they're English speakers, so I'm thinking they're UK or maybe Australian. Either way, they're Anglo, the whole bodyguards. Second of all, the generals aren't going to do anything because they're just as corrupt as he is. They're all making massive amounts of money off this. As far as they're concerned, as far as the political leadership, the military leadership in Ukraine is concerned, the more the better. Let this war just go on forever because they're making money. It's the average guy on the street. It's that lieutenant or that sergeant, that lieutenant. They're getting whacked and wiped out. The top brass is living high on the hog. Ukraine is probably the most corrupt country in the world. The most corrupt dictatorship. That's how I love America. Oh, it's Western values. If you mean Western values, where you get to kill off or imprison all your political opponents, ban their parties, confiscate their wealth or their estates, consolidate all the media under you, ban elections, ban religious organizations you don't like, ban any foreign language you don't like, which, by the way, the Poles and the Hungarians, Romanians haven't exactly forgiven Zelensky for that either. And then just say everybody's either my ethnic group or this mythical Ukrainian ethnic group, or we're going to kill you off. Oh yeah, that's just the epitome of democracy right there. Well, actually, it is democracy, because democracy is 51% of the population taking away the rights of the 49. Thomas Jefferson. That really is democracy. It's mob rule. That's what democracy is. But is it a representative government? Is it a government where the people have any say? No, absolutely not. It's a tyrannical dictatorship that uses a mob to kill off whatever opponents it has. That's what the U.S. and the UK have created, and the Germans and the French too.
Yeah, let me ask you this. What has restrained Russia from sending one of their Kinzhal missiles to Kiev and taking them all out? Not the whole city, but taking out Zelensky, taking out all those other neo-Nazis, all those U.S. and Canadian and French and whoever mercenaries. I mean, they know where they are, don't they?
Colonel McGregor said it right, and I've been saying it for the last year and a half. The problem is the leadership here really doesn't understand the people they're having to deal with. In this case, I'm talking about Westerners. The concept here is we're moving slow. We're hitting them hard, but we're moving slow, not to spook the West, so all of NATO doesn't get into a fight with us because, they're now scared of us. That's the mentality. That's where all the slow go. Steady, slow go. Here we're predictable. We're just going to keep massacring the enemy as they come at us. Problem is that's the exact opposite, as you well know. That's the exact opposite of the mentality of the West. If Russia came in as they were expecting with a big sledgehammer, beat everybody up, blew everything up, and left a pile of bodies, the West would be at the negotiating table instantly. Because now they're afraid. Just like the Iranians. The Iranians smacked U.S. base in response to Trump's assassination of Salini. I'm horrible with names. Who was on a peace mission to discuss end the conflict with the Saudis. Is there a war with Iran? Hell no. Absolutely not. Just the opposite. And that's the problem is Russia doesn't understand it. As they go slow go, you got the Western leadership that's convincing itself that, the Russians are incompetent, they're stupid, they're inept, they're alcoholics, they're this, they're that, and they repeat that in their little echo chambers nonstop, and they start to believe this, and they lose their fear. But there are red lines, and they are pushing them, and sooner or later, it's going to come to a hit. And it might be a nuclear hit. That's the damn problem. Neither side is really understanding each other. And I've tried to make that point. The mentality here is that people still don't want to understand how the West thinks. And the West doesn't want to understand how Russia thinks. So that's where we find ourselves at the moment.